welcome to the conversation. My name is Yona Oyego-Masade. And as always, this is the show that tries to bring you the ins and outs on the biggest political stories on the continent. Now, tonight we're talking about South Africa. Jacob Zuma's son is at the state capture hearing. He's responding to some very, very shocking allegations. Now, can he escape the hot seat this time unscathed as he did before? Now, there are those of the opinion that guilty or not, this man is simply hot. All this and more on the conversation tonight. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now, of course, as always, we love to hear from you. So please find us at News Central TV on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and use the hashtag #NCTheConversation if you want to join this discussion. Now, let's go straight into it. Zuma's son, that's Jacob Zuma's son, is again at the state capture hearing in South Africa. Now, Duduzane Zuma, the son of the former president Jacob Zuma, has denied all allegations made against him of being the fixer in dealings between politicians and the controversial Gupta family. Allegations which, in his words, brand him as the face of corruption in South Africa. The junior Zuma gave testimony at the state capture inquiry headed by Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo, hence the Zondo hearings. He's a judge of the Constitutional Court, which is the highest court in South Africa. Now, according to the junior Zuma, witnesses who came before him to present their testimony against him at the inquiry were merely tarnishing his image and were not being truthful. He claims that he is innocent of any wrongdoing during his working ties with the exiled Indian-born Gupta Brothers, and this was during his father's administration. Now, crucially, Duduzane Zuma claimed that the former Deputy Finance Minister, Mbisi Jonas, claims that he was never informed that a meeting he had been invited to attend would hold at the Gupta family home. Now, why was this meeting important? Because the minister also claimed that at that meeting, he was offered a bribe of 600 million rands in order to become finance minister and tilt economic policy in the Gupta's interests. Now, Duduzane Zuma was called to answer this and a number of other damning allegations to which he made completely counterclaims. It remains to be seen whether or not evidence will emerge to separate fact from fiction in this saga. But until then, you've got the conversation to help you clarify what it is we do know at this time. All right, thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining me on the show tonight. We have Chukwudi Ezugwu. Thank you, Chukwudi,
thank you
once again. And we have Abdulateef Ahmed. Thank you guys for joining me on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Now, let's just dive straight in, because obviously you can hear that there's a lot of heat in this story. Let's first of all bring our viewers up to date. What exactly is the state capture, in fact, first of all, that term, and why are South Africans embroiled in this state capture inquiry?
Essentially, during the past regimes, it's been assumed that a lot went down, favoritism. The government was doing a lot with private people, and it looked like resources of the government or of the people was simply railroaded for a few. And so the need for inquiry, because when people have snippets of information, there is always grumbling, there's reaction, there is distrust in the system, so people needed to know what went down. And that was why the commission had to.
So hence the commission. Okay, thank you very much for clarifying that. Now, how is Duduzane Zuma implicated? What are some of the things that he's alleged to have done during the time of his father's administration?
Okay, so it's important to understand that to get the end result, you must have people who play a very important role. I'll call them stakeholders. For example, you have the president of the Republic of South Africa. You have those who have been accused now, or those who have to contend with the allegations, the Gupta family. And then you need a middleman, somebody who should act like the bad guy or the bad person, in case you have females too. The bad person that would be the intermediary between the government or that key person in government and those who are interested in doing business with the government. So, that's the role of Duduzane.
So Duduzane has...
Yeah, he's seen as the
was that middle guy? Was that
I mean, who is seen broker as the Mr. Fix-It? So you do not get to see the government in certain meetings or gatherings, and you do not also get to see these people. So this is the person that takes the information from point A to point B. But it's also really very, very important for people to set aside the bias whether you like it or not. I mean, because he is Jacob Zuma's son, and because of the feeling that certain people have about Jacob Zuma, anything that is associated or anyone that is associated with Jacob Zuma automatically becomes tainted. And so you tend to say, you know, because this person is associated with Jacob Zuma,
fishy.
It smells fishy.
Okay, but let me ask this question. So when his father first, I believe, when his father first got into office, he was a young man. He had not even got his first job at the time. And very, very rapidly, he seemed to gain a lot of prominence in the business world through his dealings with the Gupta family. So it might smell fishy, but I feel like, you know, if there's no fish out of the water, it wouldn't be smelling fishy. So what exactly did he really gain during the time with the Guptas? Because he's not denying that there's a relationship between him and the Gupta family. He's not denying that they've had business dealings. What exactly is it? Because he's now standing as a billionaire in rand terms. What has he been busy doing with the Gupta family that has earned him so much?
It's rumored that he had dealings, you know, in the telecom sector, in the power sector, excuse me, in the power sector, and it may not be clear because most times it is assumed that once you are in government, you do not have business in business. You know, you should leave business to the business people while you face issues of governance. So we are not clear. You know, we are not sure where particularly these collaborations had happened. But it is clear, it is understandable, it is assumed that because of how much influence the Guptas, you know, had control, you know, in South Africa, they have, you know, been able to get the president's hand into too many things. So
some of the allegations made against him, thank you very much, Abdul Latif, is that he was part owner of a media organization that the Guptas owned, you know, co-owned, and that organization was used as a propaganda tool in order to sort of, because there's so many headlines at the time during Zuma's administration. I'm sure you remember almost every day you'd see some headline or the other about state capture, you know, and so at the time there was like, okay, he set up this media machinery to counter that. But along with that, there are also allegations which he had to refute or whatever he had to respond to about how he was essentially brokering government relationships so that government officials and government ministers will create government policy that favored, you know, the business dealings that he had with the Guptas. So whether it was in areas of mining, you know, they received mining concessions, power. In fact, there was an infamous Russian nuclear power plant deal that he was trying to push. And I think that's one of the reasons why, you know, the whole thing sort of blew up. So really, he's coming now and he's saying, I deny this, this is untrue, this is... What can we make of that?
I think your explanation is really very clear. If you have a system where you try to promote a flawed system or a structure that favors you when it gets to a point where decisions are made, you give yourself an undue advantage. For example, in the case with the deputy minister, it was essentially, we want you to become finance minister because we know that there are certain things that you will do in our interest.
Favor, yes.
So it's not essentially about dipping your hand in the cookie jar. It's having a system that allows you to have an advantage when it gets to that point, so you can make some more profit for yourself. I mean, the capitalist is just is essentially concerned about making profit. So if they have a situation where you can knock out, for example, 2 people and leave weaker competitors to allow me, you know, that undue edge, then they would go for it. Now, that is what people are talking about.
And
now,
that's what is that deemed unlawful? Is that unlawful, or is that just on the edge of what is lawful?
It's unlawful. I mean, because if you favor certain people, it is a form of corruption, because that favoritism means that you are muzzling people out of competitive advantage. You know, so it is unlawful.
Okay, so quick one. You see why there is a problem and why these guys are really very smart. What they do is they understand how it works. Now, if we get one of our kind to occupy this position, and then we come tomorrow to say, you know, now you're our guy, the person would allow. So if at the end of the day there's an issue, it is that person that allowed for that process.
Takes the fall.
So it's not about them. So theirs is to, you know, behind the scenes ensure that if we're going to be interested in power, for example, let us see that the power minister is on our side, so that when it comes to inflating the contracts, it's not our business. So if he has anything to answer, it's the person's business. But you know, the Gupta family is tainted because people perceive that, you know, this is what they do, and they get the advantage. But I'm hoping that the South African justice system, which if you take a critical look in Africa, is one that you consider
one of the stronger ones.
Yes.
Hopefully would get
comes through. Let's actually hear what Duduzane himself had to say about his relationship with the Guptas at the state capture trials, or here rather.
I think what we need to understand is I've conducted many meetings from the Gupta residence. On a daily basis, there was a preferred meeting place outside of an office environment. My residence purely was a private residence for my stay. Yeah. I've never conducted any meetings out of my private place, so we did not go there. There's been a prevailing narrative up until this point about state capture, corruption, influence, outside of government, appointing of ministers and whatever else. Now, I'd made the decision to pull back and not to be active in a lot of roles, to my detriment. So I couldn't grow with my company. Mr. Tony Gupta is a business partner of mine.
Yes.
And he's also a very dear and close friend.
Well, I was about to check that because I seem to have read somewhere that out of the Gupta brothers, he was the one that was quite close to you.
That's correct. The reason I'm pointing that out is because I spent a lot of time with him on a daily basis.
And in regard to him, we can say he was particularly close to you.
More than particularly close to you.
Okay.
That's my guy.
So it's clear there he's not denying his relationship with them.
Yes.
He is talking about, he also made mention about that meeting we talked about, so this 600 million rand bribe promise at that meeting, and he was saying why, because the question was asked to him, why did you not take the former deputy minister to your home, which was very, very close, a stone throw away from the Gupta's home? Why, if you're going to have a meeting with him and you claim this meeting did not involve any of the Guptas, why take this person to the Gupta's residence? Because, you know, the minister had made the claim that he deliberately took him to the Gupta's residence to meet with the Guptas, where he was then offered this bribe, which he turned down. So, and he's giving the excuse, well, I'd never conducted business in my home. I mean, how plausible does this sound?
Well, excuse me. We leave it to the commission to dig more, into it. His body language seems to be contradicting what he's saying. However, no matter how prepared he feels he is, evidence will pop up to connect the dots correctly. If he says he's friends with the Guptas, well, we cannot say that it is wrong for him to be friends with them. I mean, because they are all South Africans. However, if businesses were conducted that have been seen to have been influenced by him, then that is where the issues are.
I think the Zondo Commission has a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
From all I have critically assessed, you have a situation where somebody acts like he doesn't have any business.
Absolutely.
For example, I can walk up to you and say, oh, I need you to be somewhere. And you say, no problem, because you know me. So I take you there and act like I don't know what you're discussing.
Because he claims he was just a lampshade. He didn't really participate in that meeting. He was just a silent observer.
So he feels that he feels that it is up to you to decide whatever you want. So you're asking me, I have no idea, go and ask the Guptas. But the Guptas, ideally, if somebody says, I would need you to be in a meeting, people are worried and they're afraid. So you have a guy who you believe is approachable, can speak to you and get you to come around. Because, I mean, if your residence is a minute drive away from, so why you saying
this person
and why try to explain that, in the Gupta residence they have office facilities, catering, water, and the rest of them.
Yeah, what do we need all that for?
It doesn't make sense. Look, on that note, we're going to take a break because there's obviously a lot to dig deep into. Of course, remember, you can join the conversation. The hashtag is NC the conversation. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're still watching the conversation, and we're still discussing Duduzane Zuma at state capture hearings, or the Zondo hearings, if you want to call it that, in South Africa. Now, let's talk about the other side of the story, which we sort of alluded to over the break. On his side, Duduzane Zuma is saying, I didn't know, as far as I'm concerned, no bribe was offered, no Gupta was present at the meeting except just to peek in, and it was all on the up and up. It was actually a meeting between Minister Jonas and another person who was, had a business interest, not the Guptas. On the side of Jonas, he's saying, I didn't know they were going to take me to the Gupta's house. I just was told that there was going to be a meeting between myself and another person of a business interest. I went to the meeting, surprised that I was at the Gupta's house, and then the Guptas come and offer me this big bribe. Is this just turning into a he said, she said scenario? I mean, you were saying, before we went on break, that the commission actually has a lot of work to do.
A lot of work to do because trading all these allegations right and left tells something. There's a puzzle that is yet to be resolved. And then I know that if the investigations go on, most likely they'll get to the bottom of the whole matter. Something
should come of it. Yes. Okay, now let's shift our attention to the US sanctions against the Gupta family. So as you may or may not know, and I believe you do know, the US has placed sanctions against the Gupta family. They have put travel restrictions. The Gupta family may not travel to the US. They may not invest in the US. They may not, etc., and the rest of that. In fact, we actually have some tweets to that with respect to that we'll look at in a short while. But I just want to hear your own reaction to this idea that the US is stepping into this, what might otherwise be a domestic issue, and is saying that we're actually placing sanctions against this family that has been so heavily implicated in corruption in South Africa.
I think it's essentially about interest and trying to see that, you are considered as somebody or someone that acts in a certain manner. In all honesty, the Gupta family has no need to really, for example, if you look at all of the options available on the table, be very disturbed by the action taken by the US, except for certain people who cannot do without traveling to certain parts of the world. But the truth is, if it's essentially about business, with the kind of influence that they wield in South Africa and certain parts of Africa, because of leaders who are willing to say, you people are business people, come, let's do business. Good for you, good for me. While the people suffer, it's nobody's business. I don't think there's anything to worry. But I think that, while the United States of America is acting in a certain manner, it's also important that, countries in the continent of Africa also do the needful. And the needful is having a situation where certain people do not take advantage of your laws. Because so long as you have people who are willing tools in government, you're going to carry on with this system. It's not just South Africa, you have it across the continent of Africa. So what we must do is have a system that would not allow for people to have undue advantage or use their influence in a certain way that would amount to them abusing their powers in the office that they occupy. If we push for such laws, this is what we are dealing with today.
We can close some of those holes that allow for this behavior.
So, the Duduzanes of this world, the Guptas of this world, the Zumas of this world would not have that advantage when we talk about situations like this. So the people would benefit from, the very essence of government working in the best interest of the people.
Okay, let's look at some of the tweets that have actually been responding to this quite seriously, actually. So some tweets are responding to the US sanction announcements, and others tweets are responding to, the whole situation in general. So this one says, Zuma is a thief and a criminal being protected by the South African justice system. He has stolen state assets and bankrupted his country. We are in a state of economic stagnation because of Zuma, Duduzane Zuma, etc., etc. Why are these thugs not in prison? So this person is obviously quite heated. We've got a few more tweets there. Okay, this is not one of the more serious ones, but obviously I said earlier that people have been reacting that way. It says, I have a good feeling that the US Treasury will very soon add Jacob Zuma, Ace Magashule, who is the Secretary General of the ANC, Dudu Mayeni, and Duduzane Zuma to that sanctions list. That's interesting. I actually want us to react to that. So this is where Secretary of State Pompeo is making the announcement about the sanctions against the Gupta family. But let's react to that. What's the likelihood that these sanctions, may be extended to the Zuma family and some of their other associates in the ANC? What do you think the likelihood of that is?
Well, most times the United States and most countries in Europe want to play the role of, want to be seen as not collaborating with criminals or people who have their hands in the oil or in the till of the government. However, I also know that there is international collaboration for investigating crimes and corrupt practices, and so the United States is playing safe. However, we do not leave it to what the United States does. We leave it to what the African country is able to do. And while it does that, we expect other African countries to be very concerned because you're talking about a former minister, for example, who is in charge of I think he's the chairman of MTN South Africa. Yes,
Minister BC Jonas, yes.
Good. And then, you know, and MTN South Africa has its, sister body in Nigeria and other parts of Africa. So whatever happens there should concern all of us. You know, so we hope that the commission will be able to dig in.
Okay, on that note, let me ask this question.
Yes.
If the commission does find that there was wrongdoing by Jacob Zuma, by his son, by other prominent members of the South African political machinery, Ace Magashule and the rest of them, if they find that there's clear evidence that there was wrongdoing on their part, do you think that the African Union or other African states should take similar action to the US and say, we're placing sanctions against these individuals, the Guptas and the other South African players who assisted in their corruption practices?
Yes, not even placing sanction alone, but they should be seen to be extradited for those who have run away. They should be seen to be punished. There should be, there should be punitive measures to show that the country does not support such individuals, because for them to have done that and it has come to the open, there are dozens or many more that might not have come to public notice. So they have to be punished.
Okay, let's turn our attention slightly now, because Duduzane Zuma alluded to the fact that he was caught in a political storm. He is claiming that he is the fall guy for the various sides of the ANC fighting. And I think we've seen some evidence of that. Certainly as the news plays out, as events happen in South Africa, we've seen that there are clearly factions within the ANC. They're bringing their fight out to the, into the public. We saw the public prosecutor attacking the current president just a few weeks ago, last month and the months preceding, and making accusations, and then now being sanctioned on her part for overstepping her mandate or over exceeding her mandate. So there are quarrels within the ANC, and those quarrels have spilled over.
I'm very certain that the members of the EFF will be singing hallelujah. Really very good for them. Now, when politicians have their squabble, it's good for the people because then we get the revelation and all the finding. But it is really very, very important that people are not distracted and they keep their eyes on the subject matter. The subject matter is not about I am the fall guy here because of this ANC, that ANC faction. That is why I am here. It is essentially about people abusing their office
and their
using
position.
undue influence to give themselves some sort of advantage and to the detriment of the people. So the people must insist, and the political parties must, play that part by letting them, keep or stick to the core of the subject matter. Did you abuse your powers? Why are we here? What can we do to see that, we do not have another round of this situation again? So it's not about, this unnecessary distraction. It's not our business or it shouldn't be their business if the ANC have an internal issue to sort. Good for them. If they can't, it would affect them at the polls because that's the very essence of, the average politician. But what the people must do is say that from this situation, we must learn lessons and try to see how we can build a better and a society that protects the interest of everyone and would not allow certain people undue advantage to the detriment of the collective.
Absolutely. Okay, do you want to respond to that as well? Yes.
I'm looking at it from this perspective. The fact that democracy has grown in South Africa to that extent where people can actually question what has happened in the past, stand the president before the courts and ask him very pertinent questions. For me, it is good because other presidents in other countries that have overstayed their place in leadership should be watching closely to know that if they are ousted from government, they could be made to face the courts to answer questions.
And that's another question. Is Zuma going to be invited back to this inquiry? Because he came, he made a show of coughing for a few days. That we heard more coughing than testimony, and then he disappeared and said he's done. His lawyer said these questions are inappropriate and they are unfair. Do you think we're going to have to see Zuma called back again?
He could be called back. It depends on how much information they need to make public. Yes.
So now there's the other issue.
But
which
I
is
have
not...
a different opinion.
Okay.
I'm looking at Zimbabwe and saying, certain people will just say, let us just negotiate now. Let's leave this man now. Has he not suffered enough?
In fact, I actually want to refer to that because if you look at his life on social media, so there's the one of him basically laughing at everything, laughing at everybody.
Okay.
He's just living his family life.
Asking them to bring him back.
Yes.
If they want a technical advisor.
Okay.
Making a show of the whole thing. Does this actually undermine this process that's happening?
Inside life. I think what you have is a conspiracy amongst certain members of the political class. They know that if this lightning strike you on Monday and we do not do anything, maybe to appease the god of thunder, it might most likely strike again on Tuesday and I might be the victim. So what they do is just play it safe. I mean, he has lost the position.
Yeah.
He has lost his influence. Let's just
Not
allow
all
him.
his influence though within the ANC.
He still has some influence. He still has some influence.
He still has some influence.
Yeah.
But if you look at how things have played out, he's no longer president of the Republic of South Africa.
Yeah.
Yes.
In the ANC, he has his influence, but certain people have consolidated. And I mean, you can have your influence, judging by his history, but that influence is not one that you would say, if we pool resources, we would not be able to deal with him. So some people might just say, let's leave him. If you listen to the argument, some people just say, what do you even want from this man again? Has he not lost enough?
Is that the typical African thing? Because I have to say, this is not the first situation in which I'm
Yes,
hearing
most times.
a former head of state, he has left. Now leave him now.
Yeah, most times there's that sympathy,
Yeah.
but we do not have space or time for such sympathies. People should know that their being in position of governance means that they have to account for their stewardship someday.
Okay, so let me end on this note, and this is a rapid fire question, so I need some rapid responses. Will the Zondo Commission achieve anything other than a talk shop?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't think so.
You don't think so? Okay, and that's it on the conversation. You've heard it from the experts. I myself, I'm just the conduit bringing this information to you. And look, we really want to hear what you have to say. What do you think about Duduzane Zuma's testimony at the Zondo Commission? Do you think he's guilty? Do you think he's not? Do you think he's too hot to be guilty? Let's hear from you. The hashtag is NC The Conversation, and you can find us at News Central TV on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. My name is Yona Oyegun Masere, and it's been great chatting.